welcome to another episode of Addiction Uncovered. I'm Jill, and I'm joined today by Amy. Amy is a project manager at the Nebraska Pharmacists Association, and she oversees several grant-funded programs related to Narcan and safe drug disposal. She's deeply passionate about overdose prevention and harm reduction. While she is not in recovery herself, she does have someone close to her who has struggled with substance use disorder for most of their life. And a fun fact, she is a licensed barber and a lifelong lover of punk rock music.
Yes.
So welcome, Amy. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So what led you to work in the field of addiction?
You know, it was just by chance, actually. I'd done something totally different for 25 years. Happened to know someone at the Nebraska Pharmacists Association that they were looking for someone to work with their grant programs. I mainly knew about the medication disposal program. They just started the Narcan program there, and we're like, hey, you can kind of take this over. They need a website. We need to do all this stuff. And I've just didn't know how much I would love it and how much it kind of, touched me personally that I didn't realize when I got into it, and just love what I do every day. Yeah. And I meet lots of great people. So.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds a little bit like how I got into the field too, which is you find something that you're really passionate about. This is a tricky field because you could run into a lot of roadblocks. You have some really challenging people that you work with that you're really trying to show them a different path. And we know that people are typically more successful when they're feeling ready to make a change. Yep. But yeah, and once we start in this field, I think we find that our hearts just pour out for people.
And
there's so much work to do.
Yeah, you find a lot of people who just a lot of times they don't do it for the money, right? Those kind of things. Ours is all grant funded, and I'm totally grant funded. So you just never know, from one year to the next, whether you're going to still have the funding for things a lot of times. But I just love doing it, and all the people that I get to work with and meet. And,
And we're going to have plenty of time to talk about the programs that you oversee because those programs are really important here in the community. Yeah. The interviews that we've had thus far have been really related to personal recovery stories. Right. And what I think is important for our discussion today is to look at that from a different perspective of what is it like to have someone in your life that struggles with substance use? Yeah. What is it like how do we maintain relationships with them? How do we set boundaries? Right. I know there's a lot of things for us to cover, but if you want to share a little bit, of course, we'll be respectful of your loved one's story. Yeah. But also, can you give us kind of a perspective of what that's like? Yeah.
And I will say in this work, it has given me kind of a different perspective because I do work with a lot of people who are in recovery, who are peer support specialists. I also work with a lot of people who have lost a loved one to overdose, especially people who've lost a child. My ex-boyfriend, who is still a friend of mine, and I still chat with him often. When I first met him, he was in active addiction with opioids, with heroin and other drugs, and that was a completely new thing to me. I had not seen that in my life before. I'd seen, people who had done some other things, but nothing like this. And at the time, I don't think I really noticed it, after a while, and probably now I would have been like, oh, okay, that was very obvious, and he was pretty honest about it, after a little bit. But I was, very much like, I don't know what to do with this. This is kind of out of my realm. I don't know if I can, have this in my life almost even because it was so new to me. And I, and he realized that, but I watched him go through withdrawal, which is a very horrible thing to watch someone go through. And, just was like, I need to help this person more so. He'd been in recovery before in his past, and, it had worked for years and then would not work again. And he has had a lot of childhood trauma in his life. And so, once I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm in this for the moment. We looked into methadone treatment, and that's kind of where he started. That was really the first time I walked into a place and I thought, oh my gosh, okay, this is not what you think it's going to look like. I really realized when I walked in there, like, wow, we have people in suits, we have older people, we have someone young, we have someone with their mom, we have, it was just very eye-opening to me that, wow, this could be anyone that is going in here to get help. And so I kind of traveled down that path with them and lots of different things. And, he was able to stay in recovery for quite a while. And we were probably together for a couple of years, maybe. After that, when I started to see him, he was kind of started to misuse his methadone. He had been prescribed pill methadone for him, which is really different, actually, than the liquid. I mean, you don't see it very often. But he was kind of starting to abuse those, and I could tell he was starting to kind of go down a bad path again. But he'd went back to school. He kind of found his passion in cooking, and so went to school to be a chef, but then started to kind of tumble down that hill again. And that's really where I started to kind of see where, as the person on the other side of that, you want to help that person, but you can get dragged down real quick into wanting to help them and realizing you can't help them a lot of times. And also realizing you got to take care of yourself at the same time, because I felt like I needed to help him. I needed to save him. I needed to give him money. I needed to make sure he wasn't homeless. Kind of needed to save him from everything. And when I finally went to therapy, for this, my therapist said, you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. And I was like, wow, okay. And I have done that many times in my life, but I was like, okay, that's a very good analogy for what it feels like I'm doing, and she was like, it's great that you want to be that person who can try to save that person, but we need to get you kind of towards the middle of, not being a horrible person who's never going to help anybody, but maybe a little bit where you're looking after yourself, because it was a lot of manipulation a lot of times, it still has been through my life, where, now I'm much more better at boundaries with him still, where I'm more because I'm more in this universe now. I can be like, hey, here's organizations that could help out. Here's who we need to call. I helped him. He was homeless. That was the other thing. My therapist was just like, there are places he can go if he chooses to go to them. And if he doesn't choose to that's not your fault that you're, not continuing to give him money just so that he has a place to live, because it was, draining me at some points, emotionally, physically, financially, to try to help him get out of this when it felt like he didn't really want to get out of it himself, And so, we helped him get into Centerpoint, but that took about 3 to 6 months to get into recovery there. And I think that's one of the things that we struggle with, as just people who are trying to help people in this situation, is that there just isn't enough treatment facilities a lot of times. There's resources out there, but it's not like you can just go get them the next day. It takes work to do those things. And since then he's been in and out of recovery again. He's in recovery right now. He has been for about 6 months. And it's hard as the person on the other end a lot of times, and I would think this especially with parents, you see this person and this person can be this great person that and that's when I talk a lot about stigma with people too. It's, sometimes that person isn't who you know they can be, and so it's not a version of them that you like. It's someone that can manipulate you, but you still care for that person because in there was this person that did all these great things and has a great heart and those kind of things. But it's just hard sometimes to be on the other side and be like, I have to set my own boundaries and I have to let this person do their thing, and help them in the best way I can. But that doesn't mean, always give them all the money, because, I would get in where he was not necessarily using drugs anymore, but turned to alcohol instead, and still wasn't really dealing with his mental health problems. And so, now that he's been doing that, helping, getting more help with mental health issues, and I helped him find a therapist. Now I see again that person that I know can be on his own path, can do the things that he wants to do in life. But sometimes that's hard because you see that person and then that person's gone again, again. Really recovery is a very hard journey for everyone involved. So, yeah.
Yeah. And you bring up a really good point. We don't have to be the ones to do all of the things.
Right.
We can be the ones to give them the resources so they can do the things.
Right. Because, there were times when I was like, okay, well, I'm doing all the work here, and you're not necessarily wanting to do it as much as I want you to do it. I want you to go do this thing. And sometimes I just had to, because it would make me mad too. I'd be very angry and frustrated that I was trying to help with all this stuff and that the person on the other end isn't doing their part in it, Well,
you have emotional investment.
Yeah.
Right. It's a little bit different and more removed when we're helping people that we don't know and have emotional attachment to.
Right.
It's very different to see loved ones going through this and trying to navigate what do our boundaries look like within this relationship. That can be really difficult.
Yeah. And, and I needed to make sure it wasn't affecting my relationship, in my own personal life, and people would know, because there was many times, where he would, either go into mental health facility as well, or try to kill himself. And, he would always call 911 on himself to get help. And there were different times when he would also use that, kind of against me too, to be like, hey, I'm going to kill myself, and eventually, and it seemed kind of, like I'd become hardened to it almost, because you feel like, I'd be like, okay, well, you need to get help. And I would just talk very flatlined about it. And I was with a friend one time and she was like, what is happening? And I was like, oh, Gene's in the hospital. They just called me. He tried to kill himself. But he called 911. And I'm just talking about it like I was talking about, well, let's go get some dinner tonight. And I was like, yeah, this has just been such a cycle. That it is just what it is at that point. And, I'm helping him the way I can and saying, hey, you did what you're supposed to do. You called 911. They're going to help you. You got to listen to them, because it does get hard because there are times when, he's been, said things that I'm like, wow, okay, you're going to say that to the person who helped you, who tries to help you all the time. And later he realizes, wow, okay, I should not have said that. But in the midst of them needing either that drug or that alcohol or whatever that substance is, it's just a different person, that's hurting inside, that the disease is taking a hold of them, Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that perspective of the story. Yeah. And what I've noticed throughout when you're talking about this person is there's still a lot of love and respect for that person as who they are, and knowing that they have a lot of potential to do wonderful things.
Yes. Yeah.
While sober, because it is more difficult to do that while using. So,
yes, for sure. Yeah.
So I think that does give a little hope for people that have someone in their life that's struggling and not really knowing what to do.
Yeah.
So
anyway, yeah.
Right?
there is hope. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But you do have to set those boundaries, which is really hard. It was very hard for me at first for probably a year or two. It was extremely hard for me. Yeah.
What do you think helped you the most to start doing that?
Therapy. Yeah, a good therapist. I think it's good to have your own therapist to realize like what do I need to be doing, because I think we think we're doing the right thing, we think we're doing a good thing, but you have to take care of yourself in that too and really realize what you need for yourself, because I realized I had so much anxiety too that it just made me feel anxious all the time. And I didn't want to feel that way. And I still wanted to be able to help this person while at the same time having my life, because we were not together at that point, and, and haven't been for, 9 or 10 years or something. But still, I still, know that this is a good person. He doesn't have many people in his life because, he is, burned a bridge with a lot of people. Sure. He's trying to rebuild those relationships now, but that is hard. And I know a lot of people who are peer support specialists and in recovery, and the same thing. It took him a long time to get back where people can trust you again, and it's still hard for me. He's been 6 months sober again, but it's still hard for me sometimes to be like, okay, do I believe what he's saying right this moment? It's a hard thing to trust again.
Yeah. And, we talk about in early recovery, it's so difficult because you're going through so many physical changes when you're, when you stop using whatever it is. And I want to talk a little bit about the withdrawal symptoms, because I think that's an interesting viewpoint to watch someone that you love going through that. So you have not only the physical side of things, but then you are also asking them to change their friend group, to change their relationships with people they have, to completely start over essentially.
Yeah.
While going through all of this, which can be
feel
difficult.
the pain or the trauma or whatever. He just had so much of that and did not want to talk about it, did not want to face any of it, which is still very hard for him. But he slowly has been able to, I think. But watching someone go through withdrawal, when I'm doing presentations, on Narcan, and I talk to people about how hard that is to watch someone, go through withdrawal. And you, at some points, want to almost say like, oh my gosh, okay, let's just give them whatever they're taking, because this is horrible to watch someone, do this. But, that's why medication assisted treatment is so important, and getting people, that can help them in treatment facilities to go through that part of it. I've known people who've done it on their own, which sounds horrible. But it's a very hard thing to watch someone go through it. Yeah.
Tell us more about what those withdrawal symptoms look like.
For him, it was very much a lot of pain. He could hardly sit still. His legs were super restless. A lot of it was pain, just the pain, and him kind of screaming out about it, not being able to sleep, sweating, throwing up. And again, you want to take care of this person. And the person isn't happy at that moment either. I think you want to do it. You want to, get to the point where you don't need this anymore. But and that's why I always describe it is like a hamster wheel, because you're trying to stop, but yet you can't, because this drug has such a hold on you. Especially with opioids or alcohol, even, where it's just such a painful process that it's hard to feel like there's a side over there that's not going to feel this way.
Do you feel like, or do you see in the work that you do, that a lot of people will continue use to avoid those withdrawal symptoms because they are so terrible?
Yes, I think so. I think, and because they know that's going to stop the pain of it all, and I think, like you were saying too, there's other things besides that withdrawal. You get through that, and then you're like, oh gosh, now, do I need to find new friends to hang around with? Do I have to face these things that made me use this substance in the first place? Now I've got to actually deal with these things that I don't want to deal with, or go through. He's gone through, lots of different medications, and recently they even did genetic testing and stuff on him to figure out, like, okay, what would work best with you in order to help with, severe depression and possibly even being bipolar, those kind of things. So, and then just with his ethnicity and stuff, just, what would help with that the best, because that's a process on its own,
Right.
Even, just mental health in general, trying to figure out what's best for someone with that. So
absolutely. And I think you rarely will see one without the other.
Yeah.
So mental health and substance use really go hand in hand.
Yeah. And that is just such a, I will say, I feel like most of the people that I work with that are in recovery, it almost goes hand in hand. I was at a thing the other day, and someone had said, like, oh, raise your hand, if you've known someone with addiction or with mental health or PTSD. And so many people had their hand up the whole entire time, because you're just like, so many people are dealing with something, so
for sure.
Yeah.
So Narcan.
Yeah.
You're out on the streets, sometimes literally, but also within the programs, right. Screaming about Narcan and how important this is. And help us to understand, what is it?
It basically will reverse an opioid overdose. So we always explain it kind of as there's opioid receptors that you have. The opioid attaches to it. Narcan kind of knocks that opioid off that receptor and brings your breathing back. It does put people into withdrawal, though, so it's not a super great feeling, depending on if someone is a regular drug user or not. But it really brings that breathing back to you until you can get medical help. We always like to tell people someone can go back into an overdose within 30 minutes. So once you've given it to them, you still want to make sure you're calling 911. Sometimes it takes more than one dose. But it won't hurt anyone if they're not having an opioid overdose. It's not going to hurt someone if you gave it to them. So we always say it's better to try it. And I think that makes people feel better sometimes when they're like, ooh, okay, so if someone was having a heart attack or overdosing from something else, they were passed out from drinking. If you give them Narcan, it's not going to do anything to them. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good to know. And so I would assume then it's probably, or should be, part of a process when someone's in the hospital and has had an overdose, or there's opioid use disorder in the history. do you typically see that they're given that upon discharge, or what does that look like in that setting?
Not necessarily, no. Okay. And part of it is just access to Narcan. So, when I started this program and I'm with the Pharmacists Association, it was still a legend drug. So it still had to be prescribed, and a prescription label had to be on the Narcan still. And so that's why we partnered with pharmacies to get Narcan to free for people. But, and now it's over the counter, but we still do grant funds. And, so it's not just like you can access it easily, but not necessarily even a hospital, unless they're going to pay for it and have it as a process to give to people. I would say that a lot of times is the funding for it. With our program, people can go to a pharmacy that participates with us and get it for free. They can get up to 5 boxes of it. They can order it online through our site. And then there's different vending machines that a lot of places have now, and agencies that are handing it out. But a lot of it really is just funding, because it's expensive to buy it. If you go into like a Walgreens, a lot of the chain stores sell it, and it's almost $50 a box. So, if someone is using drugs, that's maybe not what they're going to go spend their money on. It's not $50 to go get this Narcan. And it still kind of has stigma. So sometimes people don't like to go in and get it, even if it would be for a friend or family member. So that's kind of what we do, is kind of try to educate people more on it, kind of get that stigma reduced so it's kind of a normal thing to have. We even just did a little video on parents and kids who are kind of packing to go to college, and, throw it in their first aid kit that they have with them just so they
smart.
have it,
that.
So, we're trying to get more people to realize that, it's just not for those people, is what a lot of people think. And again, that kind of goes back to going into that methadone clinic where I was like, oh my gosh, this can affect anybody. We think it can't with opioids, especially just because you're prescribed them a lot of times and then you become addicted to them. Now kids, try something and something's laced with fentanyl. There's just so many different things out there now that why not just have it just in case?
Absolutely. Well, and I think too that we forget that it's here, because when you look at there's so many videos too that you see out there of the bigger cities, San Francisco to name one. I mean, there are so many that you can see it on the streets. You see how opioid use is happening on the streets,
right?
People in zombie-like states, and it's so scary. And we don't, not that we don't have that here, we don't see that in certain areas, but it's really small in comparison.
I think here you do have to maybe go to a certain area to see it more, and probably in the work that we do, I will do a lot of clinics, and part of the thing with our vending machines is getting it to people that are homeless or facing homelessness, aren't going into a pharmacy, aren't getting normal health care, and so seeing people where they're at is something that we try to do, but we're trying to make it accessible to everyone, and we think it doesn't happen in Nebraska, especially in some of the small towns, and it really does. People just don't realize it, that it is happening. Especially, Omaha or Lincoln, the bigger cities, too, but it happens everywhere, and that's one thing I've definitely learned with this job is that it can affect anyone. We're doing a specific thing with parents right now, just trying to tell them, talk to them about it. 'Cause we do get a lot of people who say, oh, my kid would never do that. And I'm always like, are you 100% sure that your kid would never take anything that they're not supposed to? Never have someone say, oh, this is just an Adderall, this is just a Xanax, this is just an Oxycontin, that all they think that, oh yeah, okay, well, all those are prescribed, so it must not hurt me. But if you don't know where that prescription, if it's really not a prescription pill, we just talked to a family who their son, was addicted to Adderall, and was just getting it off Snapchat. So, kids can get stuff off anywhere where you have no idea where that, Adderall is coming from. And so it's so easy for one mistake, especially kids go off to college or they're trying to fit in, or there's a million things. I think when we're older, we think, oh, being a kid's easy, wait till you're older. And I'm always like, oh my gosh, is being a kid easy? I feel like it's not easy.
Right. It reminds me, it's so funny because, I work in this field too, obviously. And so I go through a lot of trainings, and there was one training I went to, and it was really powerful. And it was talking about, the pills that kids are getting in schools that are laced with things that kids are dying. And so I remember going home that day, and I said to my kids, I'm like, don't take anything that anyone gives you because you don't know what it is.
Right.
I thought I scared the crap out of them.
Right.
And the next day my daughter came home and she said, oh, I had a headache, but I took this Advil from somebody.
And you're like, oh no, yeah,
gosh.
because and they're young, so they think, yeah, it's just an Advil. It's just, I don't know. Someone said it's fine, because when you're young, you think nothing's ever going to happen to you, So that's what a lot of people think. But it does, it happens to good kids, bad kids, all kids. It doesn't. I work with a lot of parents who unfortunately have lost a child and didn't think it was their kid. They didn't know anything about it. They had great relationships with their kids. So you just don't know. That's the thing. And so why not be prepared? Prepare your kids, talk to your kids about it. Talk to your kids about Narcan. Anyone can carry Narcan. So if they're prepared, the worst that would happen is they could save someone's life. If they were at a party, if they were with friends, if one of their friends made the mistake, even if maybe they're not going to do that, but, one of their friends took a pill, from someone else and passed out, so they would know what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, yeah. I think there's a lot of education we could be doing.
A lot
with
of
the
education
kids too.
Yeah.
And I think about those families with that have lost their children to whether it's ongoing drug use or just a one-time experimental use or unknowingly, right?
Yeah.
And you think, gosh, it must be difficult to I think about how I've talked with my kids about drug use, not to take some of that blame or feel the stigma or all of those things. Just knowing that we can do all the things to try to protect kids from this, and we're really powerless.
Yeah.
Right?
And, and still, even again, even if you do talk to your kids, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to do one of those things. I'm sure our parents told us to do not to do lots of things that we did anyway. Totally. But at least you can educate them more or make sure they have Narcan on them or make sure that they know, where it's at in different places. Plenty of schools have it now so that kids even know where to go get it if they had to run to and get it. So,
or even just showing them that you're willing to have the conversation.
Yes.
That can be powerful
and
enough.
Or to come to you, because that's the thing with stigma too. I think if we're talking negatively about whether it is substance use or, using certain words when we talk about things, and then parents, kids hear their parents say those sorts of things, and then they think, oh, well, I think I do have a problem, but I don't want to go to them because they say these things. So they're going to think badly of me because this is how they think about people who, are using drugs or those kind of things. And so, letting people know that they can come and talk to you, if they did have an issue. Because, if you can get someone help, that's the best thing, that you can actually get them help and, hopefully help them to get on a different path in their life. So,
Wonderful. All right. Is there anything, maybe one thing that you would really want people to know about addiction? If they have any preconceived notions about what that looks like or questions, what would you tell them?
I think one of the main things is it can happen to anyone. No one is immune to it, really. It doesn't make someone a bad person. When we're doing presentations, we always end with, substance use isn't a moral failing. It's a disease and it can happen to anyone. And I think that is just true. We like to judge people, for what they're doing or say, oh, just stop doing it. And if it was that easy, people, wouldn't be doing it. They would stop doing it. I always say no one wakes up one day and thinks, what's going to be super easy for my life is to start having a substance use disorder. Yeah, that'll make it super easy. My family's going to be great. Everyone's going to love me. Nothing will be bad. So that's just not how it happens. There's a lot more behind it. So I think just having some grace with people, being kind to people, realizing that, it might take a lot out of you to help people, but people can recover. They can get better. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to make sure that we have in our notes that we have links to the programs that you help to oversee, so people know how to access the safe drug disposal program that you oversee, as well as Narcan access.
Yeah.
So hopefully people will reach out to make sure that they're prepared in case they come across anyone that needs that. So I appreciate so much that you came on today to share your story and your experience, a different perspective coming from someone who has a loved one in their life with addiction. Yeah. And thank you for all the work that you're doing in the community. It's very important.
Thanks.
So, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.